And if you have Facebook streaming, you'd want to turn your thing down all the way. All right, looks like we're live, sir.
Awesome.
Yes, sir.
There we go.
All right. Okay, so let me go back here. Turn this down all the way. All right, there it is. All right, cool, man. Well, thanks for meeting with me today.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm actually sharing it on my page too, real quick.
Okay.
Just
Sure.
Here we go. All righty.
So, like I said, I wanted to switch up kind of like my format because I was just chatting with people that I felt like chatting with, you know?
Mhm.
But I decided to combine kind of like this other thing I was doing, thought questions. So the first thing I want to do is I'll ask you a thought question, which is just a question that, maybe we'll talk about it for a while. Maybe we'll talk about it for like a minute and then it's over. Who knows? I don't know. It depends. And yeah, and then we'll just go from there, whatever. So I'm
Dope.
gonna give you an option though, okay?
Okay.
Because I have 3 different thought questions. So I'm gonna let you kind of choose which one you want me to ask. Okay?
Okay.
So the first one is dealing with the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is more kind of, I guess, like a racial thought question. And then the third one is those two, I think, are more kind of polarizing, maybe a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more. Who knows?
Yeah.
This last one is just more kind of whatever.
Okay.
Is
I
that a
mean, we
good
can.
description? I don't know.
Yeah, that works. We can start with the vaccine. We might get through all 3. We'll see.
All right, cool. All right, so okay, I kind of want to preface this a little bit, and the reason why I wanted to do this thought question in this format because I think it's much more interesting to have a conversation
Mm-hmm.
versus before I was just saying the thought question out to the camera and that was it. And then, people could type their answers, but normally I'm sure there's plenty of times where you want to say something or respond to a video, but you're too lazy to type it all out or whatever, and you don't want to. But in this way, at least there's some dialogue and we can get through some kind of ideas with it. But,
Dope.
um, and in a way, I don't even know if it is a question, but, and so let me start here by saying, okay, so I feel like how well you do with predicting what happens in the future is
Mm-hmm.
an indicator of how accurate you kind of see the world. And it's not necessarily like 100%. And I mentioned this, I think, in like some other video at one point. But the way I see it is, let's say that, and hopefully this is not too I guess boring or whatever, but let's
No.
say that you have an angle moving at this direction, right? And then it cuts off. And then you want to predict where it would wind up. But we all
Mm-hmm.
have on a set of glasses that kind of skew our perception of kind of where it was in the start, right? So let's say my set of glasses say it looks like this, so I predict that it's going to wind up here. Your glasses say it looks like, let's say, this, and it winds up here. And then the marker, let's say, is here, is closer to how I thought it would be. I feel like that lends to my perception of the world.
Got you.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So the reason why I bring this up is because initially, when the vaccine, I guess, first started to get talked about, and when it first came out, the consensus was that it's just going to be a vaccine. It's going to be completely voluntary. There no companies are going to require it. Like one of my clients, actually, he's working on a vaccine. He's a scientist. He's working on a kind of more of a traditional vaccine for it. And I remember bringing it up, and I go, hey, I think what's going to happen is they're going to start requiring it for you to be able to get on a plane. And he goes, no, the conspiracy theories, that will never happen. Never, never. That, like he was just like so
Mm-hmm.
upset that I would even bring it up, that potentially that's where it's headed. And now it's already happening.
Yeah.
And I brought that up to him. I said, hey, You know, remember when you said there's no way that it would ever be required to get on a plane, and now it's already happening? So the thought question is this. I'm interested to hear your kind of prediction on kind of where you see things going. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And and if anyone's watching this, if you want to, you can chime in and, you know, type in the comments on kind of how you see things going. Um, Recently, I met with him again, and I kind of gave my prediction. You know, I said, okay, this is where I think the world is going, you know, specifically kind of related around the vaccine and how that's going to be. He basically thinks that it's going to be gone. You know,
Mhm.
there'll be no future need for it. This is just a temporary thing. No businesses will be requiring it. No, you know. And then another reason why I want to bring this up too is because I would think that if you're open to kind of assessing your perception of the world, you'd be willing to say, okay, maybe my perception isn't exactly 100%. Because I asked him, I
Mhm.
said, let's say that in 10 years, my version of reality is true. Because he said, there's no way. Because I basically said, this, and this will happen. He said, no, no way. And I said, let's just say hypothetically, it does happen that way. Would you reassess the way that you see the world? And he said, no, it's just a coincidence. You know, there's, you know, so basically, you know, his version of how he sees the world is absolute. Yet already you can see that what I had predicted is already being implemented. Do you see what I
Yep.
mean?
Oh yeah.
Hopefully, I didn't rant on too long.
Nah, you're good.
All right. So what do you think about this?
So I'm gonna start from the beginning and say that when it first came out, like when we first started talking, the COVID talks came out last March. The one thing that I noticed going into the summertime is that it was a lot of fear mongering coming from the media, coming from just all over about COVID. And not once did I see anywhere like a mainstream source come to talk about a healthy way to take care of yourself, a way for you to be able to balance your gut health, a way for you to be able to balance your health overall. And for me not seeing that and me starting to see then the talks of vaccines coming, for me, I was like, it sounds like that's kind of like a plan. Because why, if you really want the best for us, why would you not give us the best options for ourselves that we can do for ourselves? And so with that taking place, and now even where I'm at now, you see how businesses are already starting to say, well, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. If you're not vaccinated, you do, and all this other stuff. Even though I think it's like based off HIPAA laws, they can't actually ask you if you are vaccinated or not. And so it's kind of like we are right now in like a limbo space, a space where there's some people who are like, yes, we need this. And those are the people I say who really don't think for themselves or ask questions. And then there's those other people who are like, why do we need this? This makes no sense. And I think that as we progress further, I'm gonna say within the next 5 years, one of two things. There's a chance for a collapse of life how we know it, or there's going to be a give on one of the sides. Either this is going to disappear, or it's going to be something that is going to cause that collapse because there's going to be two factions of people, one that wants something to do with it and another one that doesn't want anything to do with it. Because the way that I see it is, why, if we're the land of the free, why are we kind of being forced to do this? It doesn't make like none of this is logical to me. That's why I just haven't been, all of it's just been really illogical across the board, especially in the beginning. That was my first red flag, was nobody talked about getting outside to get more sun. They're telling you to stay inside the house. Nobody's talking about to exercise, at least going to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Like I actually went and I started reading about viruses. Some, I'm not saying I'm an expert by any means. I just looked at books. And
Mm-hmm.
from what I learned was that at its core, it's just cellular erosion. Like your cells are dying. So to combat that, you would need a higher level of cellular rejuvenation. And to do that, you just be more healthy and not eat more processed stuff and things like that. But no one's talking about that. They're only talking about get this to be safe. You have to protect others. And they're kind of using guilt and shame to kind of push people in that direction. And so I either seen it as being a collapse of life how as we know it, or it's going to be a give on one side.
When you say collapse as life as we know it, can you explain that a little bit more on what that means to you?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I'm not saying that it'll be violence. I just think that it'll be issues as to where there's going to be people who, okay, cool, we're not working anymore. And so there could be sectors of the economy that collapse as a whole because they don't want to be a part of those things. And then the people that, and then in that desperation, you can see companies making choices that's into bringing people who might not be fully qualified, and that could lead to more issues. It's just going to be small incremental things that lead to more issues down the road until there could be, I don't know, a total economic collapse or something like that.
Okay, so the way that you see kind of the future unfolding is we can either go down one road, which is like chaos kind of in a way,
Yeah.
collapse, or you think that it could
Yeah.
possibly
Yeah.
rebound.
Yeah, I think that it could be like it could go on the other road. It kind of like two sub options as to where we either get to the point to where they're starting to put people in camps for not getting the vaccine, as crazy as that sounds, or it
Mm-hmm.
gets a point to where the vaccine, like your friend said, disappears altogether. That part I'm not 100% sure of. I do feel like though that whole chaos side is
Mm-hmm.
something that is very possible. The other two kind of depend on us as people.
So if you had to put your money and you had to say this is what it is versus saying this could happen or this could happen, which one in your mind do you think would be more probable? Or you can say
Mm.
something in between. Like if you had to put your money down and say, you know, of course, we're not mind readers. Anyone
Oh
could be
yeah.
wrong.
Oh,
So
definitely.
just whatever you think.
So I really don't operate in absolutes. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say the most likely outcome is going to be kind of like the subcategories I talked about. Either it's going to get to where you have to have the vaccine or it's going to disappear altogether. Because I don't think it's going to be able to be this limbo state that we've been in for a long time. Because I do DoorDash. And so there's some job places I go that says you have to have a mask to come in here. And there's other places I go through that don't even have a sign on the door at all. I think at some point a side's going to be chosen. It's just I'm not sure which side's going to choose because I think as a collective it depends on all of us. I know a lot of us wait around to be told what to do and told what's what, but I
Mm-hmm.
see now that through this situation, more and more people are starting to think for themselves and ask questions.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Got you.
That that's the thought question. The thought question is
Oh,
basically what. So I'm talking to the people. If anyone's watching this now or later, um, where do you see things headed specifically in regards to the vaccine, and as far as whether or not will it just kind of disappear? Will it be forced on you? How do you feel the future is going to unfold? I'll tell you what I think is going to end up happening, just so yeah, that's one of the benefits of I guess the thought question. I think I don't know if it's necessarily going to be COVID-19. Maybe it's a mutation of the virus. Something's going to happen. Maybe it's another virus that happens. But I think that this is just a stepping stone. I think that what will end up happening is it will just be more of kind of like a common thing that people do. So kind of
mm,
like, like remember initially when you upgraded your phone, like you upgraded, it was like kind of, it was a rare thing.
yeah.
You press upgrade. What I mean is the software. Now it's a
Mm,
reoccurring thing.
I
So
see
I
what you're
think
saying.
that with the vaccine, it's just going to be more of a common thing. Right now, people are thinking it's just a one time thing. I just got to go get the vaccine once. I think that it's going to be a reoccurring thing. I think that it's going to be harder and harder to live life without it. So I think
Absolutely.
eventually it'll probably get to a point to where, and this is within, I'm guessing, the next 10 years, you won't be able to get on a plane. You won't be able to work at many jobs. You do DoorDash. You won't be able to, maybe you won't even be able to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um, and I definitely think there's going to be some kind of measure that will be able to tell whether or not somebody has it. Because right now I can say, I got it. They don't know. But
Yeah.
there's going to be something that's going to be implemented that will identify Nick saying Nick got it or Nick doesn't have it. How that mechanism will happen, I don't know. But I'm confident that there will be some kind of mechanism that will be implemented. And again, that's just that's just how that's kind of how I see things going.
Yeah.
So who knows?
No, yeah. Got to wait
All
and
right.
see.
All right. So I'm interested in some of the things you've been doing lately. I think you've been doing some podcasts or something. You've been making some videos. So, like, what's up with all that? Tell me about that.
So my brother and I started our own company. We teach a social emotional learning program. Right now, we're doing it with educators because our goal is to illuminate the way for the next generation to be aware, be more accountable, and to appreciate life. And so we developed a 12-week program that helps take people through kind of assessing themselves to becoming more aware, and then helping them to build simple, sustainable self-care habits that they can use to kind of change their life in the direction that they want it to go.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
So you and your brother, you developed say it again,
It's a social emotional learning program.
social emotional learning program,
Mm-hmm.
12 weeks.
Yep.
And this is via, is it like a program that's already there and then somebody just purchases this thing?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
So you can do it that way. We have options with it to where you can just purchase it, because we have, it's called the Balance Blueprint Journal. So you can purchase that by itself and go through it yourself. And so kind of like we just had one client out in Texas. We got to work with a school of about 44 teachers. And since we worked kind of more hands-on with them in that, so we kind of walked them through the process a little bit more than if somebody was to just buy it. But yeah, there's different options that we offer with the program.
Where are you right now? Like
I'm in Indiana right now.
Indiana. Okay.
Yep.
And
So
when,
everything's digital.
okay. So when, because I met you here.
Yep.
So you were just visiting when you were here, or were you
So
staying here temporarily?
staying there temporarily. I was there until about January. So I was there from about June to January of that time when we met.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you and your brother, like, kind of explain that to me. Like, how do you decide to do that? How do you say, hey, let's make this social, emotional thing?
So he had his own path to where he was kind of already doing that, to where he had some health issues, and that kind of gave him a different perspective on life, to where he chose to take more accountability for his life. And by taking more of that accountability, he was like, oh, this is something I can share with people. So that kind of led him to develop the program. On the opposite end, I was on my own journey, and even though it was different from his, I was kind of in the same space. I wasn't developing a program, but I began to take more accountability for my life, began to do things different in my life. And he kind of saw it lining up with his. And so he asked me to join his team. And that kind of put us in a position to be able to offer two different perspectives of the same goal to people, because not everybody sees things the same way.
So I'm interested in this because I
Yeah.
like one of the things that I'm very a big fan of is accountability. No, no. What was the other word that you said? It wasn't accountability. It was
Awareness.
awareness. Mention those words that you say.
It is
That kind of,
accountability,
uh-huh.
awareness, and then appreciation of life.
Okay, accountability, awareness, appreciation. Um, I guess one of the thing that for some reason I thought you said was personal responsibility, but um,
That goes in accountability.
okay, okay. So can you explain some of that? Like like
Mm.
how does that kind of unfold with somebody? Like you mentioned working with some teachers, you
Yeah.
mentioned so
So I'll just kind of give you like the first one of our first steps. So we break it down as an acronym, BALANCE. So like the first one is beliefs. And so the first thing that we're going to do is to have you, I believe the exercise is you're going to write down like what you believe about yourself or what you identify with. And then as we go through that process, we then get to dissect those beliefs. Like, why do you believe this about yourself? Why is your identity placed in this? And through that process, we're able to help you kind of come up with it on your own. Because from my perspective, a lot of people, the life that they live isn't the life that they choose. It's the life that they're told or the life that they see. And so that's why a lot of people will lack the accountability to create the life that they want, because everything is given to them. They're more of a consumer than a creator. And a lot of that lies in your identity. And when you can figure out that you can choose where your identity goes, that gives you that accountability, because now you have more control over what you're doing.
okay. That's cool. I like that.
Okay.
So a few things come to my mind. One is like from the business side. Two is just the how this whole thing's like kind of manifested. Like myself, I've done a lot of personal development as far as like pretty much. I have a bookcase, and that thing's pretty much primarily consists of personal development books. You know, every now and then I like to read a book just to be entertained, but in general, if I'm going to read a book, it's normally a personal development book. I've gone to a bunch of seminars and stuff like that. So I'm assuming for you to do something like this, there had to be you had to be exposed to something along those lines.
Oh yeah.
Like you've had to read, some personal development books. You probably maybe a YouTuber kind of inspired you. So what are your like kind of inspirations, or where have you kind of gathered some of your knowledge that has helped you create this curriculum?
Dope. So it's for me, it started with where I was at in life. I got to a point in life to where everything that I wanted to do was gone. The stuff that I had was gone. So I pretty much hit like what people call rock bottom. And as I was there, and you kind of look and it's like, well, I can build back up. But I just thought about it and was like, there has to be more to life than this. And that question kind of sparked me just kind of branching off to do different things than what I normally knew, which led me to learn about a guy named Alan Watts, who's kind of like a spiritual teacher. And I read one of his books called Become What You Are. And it wasn't so much as like someone like telling me this and me going with it. I liked it because he just kind of was like, gave you a different perspective on things, a different way to look at things. And then you figure it out for yourself as you go. And
Mhm.
as I started to do that, I realized how much like my life was my fault. Everything that happens in my life is 1,000% me, 1,000%. And when I acquired that knowledge, it was like all the doors opened up. It was like, oh, I
uh,
really can do anything because it's me making these choices along the way and stuff like that. And so that was a big one. And so with
man,
my brother kind of doing his thing, creating that program, I fit in perfectly because I see how a lot of us won't take accountability for where we're at and the things that we do. Because I
yeah.
mean, we've made being a victim a virtue in our society. People like
Mm,
to feel bad and have people either feel bad around them or make them feel better about themselves instead of taking the accountability of my happiness is my choice.
mm, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, that's something I'm really passionate about. And one thing I believe in is I believe in contradiction. So I think that there's things that can contradict, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not true. So on one hand, I feel exactly what you said. Everything that happens to you is your fault or your responsibility, or it's a result of your actions. On another hand, I feel like you're just a cog in a machine and there's nothing you can do. So I believe both those things kind of almost equally, but I do heavily favor the
Yeah.
belief that what's happening to you is your responsibility, or a result of the way that you think and what you're doing. Because if you take this perspective here, then you're just a slave.
Oh,
There's nothing.
100%.
There's nothing. So
100%.
why do anything? Because it's your genetics, it's this, it's that, it's the economy, it's my wife, my husband, blah blah blah. Versus over here, you're like, well, you know,
Yeah.
I can change the way I think. I can change my thoughts. I can change what I do. So I'm a big fan of thinking in that way. So, and I've had some conversations. You know what's interesting too? Let's assume that this is true. You're
Mhm.
a cog in a machine, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do. Let's just say almost. It's still better to think this way.
Oh,
You know what
100%.
I mean? So it's still gonna
100%.
still gonna be better. So okay, so when I met you, do you remember when that was?
Man,
Like how many years?
that was like 2015.
2015. Okay, so that's like maybe 6 years ago.
Yep.
Were you kind of already in that headspace? Were you going down that road?
That
Were
was the
you, have you
but
not arrived yet? Like, where were you in your head
that was the beginning of there has to be more to life.
while you were here?
Yeah,
You
that was
started
I
thinking that.
yep, because I was
Okay.
that's when I was kind of at that point. Like I was 25 years old, sharing a room, a bunk bed with my 11-year-old niece, had a chance to play basketball, had a chance for a bunch of stuff, had a lot of money at one time, and now I had none of it. And so I was just kind of like, nah, this can't be it. Like the goal to be rich and all this other stuff, that can't be the end to life. There has to be more than this. And so
Hmm.
that did kind of spark it. And I will say, there was a gentleman who I was working out with that said, hey, you have great shoulders. Have you ever thought about bodybuilding? And that was a huge boost for me down that path. I ended up doing that for about 2 years.
Really? Was that
Yeah,
me?
that was you. That was inside your garage.
Oh yeah, boy. Nice, dude. You know what? You know what's crazy about that? What, like, you are so unique in the sense of, like, quite literally, like, I think I have like decent genetics. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think my genetics suck, but I know people who are just ripped. They just look good. They eat, they don't eat as well. They take their shirt off, everything, and they're always talking about doing a show, and they never do it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm pretty sure when I met you, I was preparing for it, or I said I'm gonna do it, or something, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it." And
Yep.
how many times have I heard that? How many times have I heard people say they're going to do a show? So when you said it, not knocking you, I just thought, he's just saying it. I've already heard that so many times. But then, like, you were like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then you did it, dude.
Yeah,
That's crazy, man.
that was fun.
And that's nuts. Yeah, that was a crazy experience to me because I never done anything like that. And then you kept going after that, and you
Yeah, I
got
did.
real big. I don't know if you still are, but
No, so I
like
actually, no,
you're
say I
pretty
ended up,
tall too, right? You're like
yep, 6'4".
6'4". Okay.
Yep, I hit a 270 at one point.
Oh my goodness,
Yep.
that's
And then
nuts.
I end up doing like 4 or 5 more shows. I end up getting a hernia because I thought that it would be fun to, we deadlifted 500 that day and we squatted 415 for reps and I got a hernia. So
Wow.
I ended up losing like 90 pounds after all that. So now I'm back down. I'm between 190 and 200 is kind of where I stay.
Uh huh.
But I learned a lot during that bodybuilding time because it more so became, I realized like where, like I talked about a little bit ago, my identity. I realized where my identity laid, and it laid in the thoughts that I thought people thought about me. So everything that I would do within my life would be those things that I would think people would appreciate or accept. And as I was bodybuilding, I realized like that was my whole life. And so when I had the hernia and lost all the weight, I decided just to be healthy, like how I liked it. So now I'm like more into calisthenics, being flexible. I do a whole lot of yoga, different things like that
You still play basketball?
for fun from time to time.
Okay. And you used to play that like semi-professionally,
Yep.
something like that, and like in some kind of league or something?
Yep. I played in a couple of different like small semi-pro leagues, been on a semi-pro team, but that was just the extent of it, which was something that taught me something else as well, which was my self-worth was also laid in how well I performed at the sports that I played. And so it would be easy for me to work out and people see me shooting by myself and be like, he's so good. But if I was to get in the game and make 3 mistakes, I'm gonna literally shut down and not be of use to anybody. And it was
Yeah.
just like looking back on my life to be able to see how the choices that I made and the environments that I was in were kind of dictating how my life went, which inevitably gave me control of it once I became aware of it.
Nice. That's cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Man, I love basketball, dude. I haven't played. See what happened to me, to this little side thing real quick, but it was in December. I want to say, was it in December? It was like in December of 2019, like right before, because COVID happened in 2020, and I rolled my ankle like bad.
Mm,
But anyway, I was playing basketball then, and I haven't played since COVID happened. A lot of you go to a lot of the parks, and at least it was before, they take down the rim or they put something there so you can't
yeah.
play. A lot of people are afraid to play. So that's something that I'm really kind of interested in getting back in it.
Yeah.
So when you say you play here and there, like, is it something that's more structured, or is it just random?
Nah, just random. I
Okay.
actually kind of moved a lot more away from sports. Like I really got in. So I got certified in mindfulness and in life coaching. And then I've been studying like breath work. And then I actually teach like guided meditations and stuff like that. So
Dude, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you
yeah,
about, meditation. And I think I, and of course, dude, this is just a conversation. We don't need to
yeah.
agree on everything and blah, blah, blah. But um, yeah, I'm interested in your thoughts on meditation because I've had some kind of epiphanies regarding it fairly recently, fairly
Mhm.
recently. But kind of tell me about your kind of idea and perception, because to you, it's really important,
Oh
meditation.
yeah. Mhm.
Because I mean, at one point you were doing some kind of, I think you were doing like a guided one, like you did videos where it's like
Yeah.
breathing and all that. So
Mhm.
obviously, you're setting time for it. It's important. So why is it? Why are you? I mean, somebody might say, why are you wasting your time? Why are you just closing your eyes or breathing and
Yeah.
spending your day doing that?
And so for me, it's a way to practice mindfulness. So I said it before, so I'm gonna try to say how I said it. It's I lived my life based off what I thought others would think,
Hmm.
and those thoughts would create momentum. And if you don't do anything to stop that momentum is going to carry over and control that every aspect of your perspective of your life. And so when I got into like just, and this wasn't even meditating at first, it was just breathing, just like being mindful of my breath. I realized that I was able to see the fact that I wasn't like, I don't have to identify with those things. Those things aren't me. Those are thoughts, and I'm not my thoughts because I'm observing my thoughts. And
Hmm.
in meditation, I realized that I'm the observer. Like I can sit here and I can see it all. That doesn't mean that it is me because everything's constantly changing, yet I remain the same. So I don't have to
Hmm.
identify with these things outside of me.
Hmm.
And when I add that with the breath, that goes ahead and it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which for most people, they don't activate that till they fall asleep. They live their whole entire day with their fight or flight mode activated, wondering, trying to, I mean, basically trying to survive the day.
Hmm.
And when you live your life like that and you're always short of breath, everything's going to seem negative. Everything's going to seem like you have to achieve this, you have to do this. But when you allow your rest and digest system to activate, now things they slow down a little bit. You realize you have a
Hmm.
little bit more control than what you thought you had. Things aren't
Hmm.
as bad as what you thought they were. That this only if something happens, that happened within that moment. If you choose to carry that moment with you for the next 5 years, that part's on you. That was
Hmm.
your choice, but you don't have to because moment to moment, everything changes. And for me with meditation, when I got into that, one of the first things that I realized was there's no wrong way to do it. A lot of people meditate without realizing it. Kids meditate when they're playing video games because when
Yeah.
you're in that zone and the time flies by, you are in a whole nother place. You can meditate when you walk. A lot of people don't realize that they meditate at work, but they meditate on things that don't really serve them or lift them up. They meditate on things that they don't want about themselves or don't like about themselves. And
Yeah.
so it just kind of folds into what do you choose to be mindful of, to be mindful of the things that you want in the direction that you want to go, or to be mindful and say that I'm less than because of something outside of me.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I like that. I want to bring something up that is controversial. Something that you said reminded me of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that you just said is you said you are not your thoughts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I feel like in today's society, we're kind of forgetting that. And what's really let me tell you what's coming to my mind. Okay, so I watched two TED talks. You know what a TED talk is?
Yeah.
Okay, and on these TED talks, they were talking about pedophilia
Mm.
and how pedophilia is a sexual orientation.
Wow.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and the premise basically of it, and these were scientists that were, well, the two presenters were scientists, and they were basically saying that, a large, and I forgot the details and blah blah blah, but the premise of it was, a large percentage of the population has these thoughts about, doing, let's say, being with underage kids,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, they're pedophiles. So that they weren't advocating acting on these thoughts, but they were saying, well, Nick, he thought about being with a little girl, so Nick's a pedophile, right?
Mm.
Now, the problem with that, it might seem obvious to you, but it's not to her and many others, is that you're not your thoughts. So just because you have that thought doesn't automatically mean that's what you are.
Yeah.
And what you said before about the momentum,
Mm-hmm.
the problem with labeling people like that, like if Nick says you had a thought and it's like, oh, well, Nick, you're a pedophile, then what ends up happening is that thought process is going to gain momentum. You say,
Yeah.
well, that's just the way, that's who I am, there's
Exactly.
nothing I can do about it. So then, to me, you're more likely to enact that behavior because that's just the way you are,
Yeah.
versus coming in and saying, you know what, I'm not my thoughts, I can interrupt my thoughts, I can choose to have other thoughts. So just because I had that thought, boom, I don't want to do that for XYZ. One is it's illegal. Two, there's a whole host of reasons why you wouldn't want to do that.
Exactly.
Um, but then you can know, you can over time be something like you said, things are constantly changing.
Yeah.
So that
No,
might
I
seem kind of obvious to you, but I think in today's society, it's kind of like your thoughts are paramount and they define everything about you and they kind of dictate. But the thing is that they're fluid and moving. So just because you think something at one point doesn't mean that's your identity. You
exactly.
can you can change that.
Yes, you can.
And just like you said too, it may not necessarily serve you,
Yeah.
and it might not be in alignment with the reality too. You might think certain thoughts at one point, but they're not congruent with an outside. Let me ask you this question, because
Yeah.
this is something too. And again, we don't have to agree, and maybe it's because I feel like it's kind of in between personally, but um, do you believe? Let me preface like this, okay? Some people believe that there is no objective reality. Everything is in your head. You
Mhm.
may be one of them. Um, there's nothing. Everything is in your head, right? Then you have other people that are kind of like, reality is what it is, and that's just the way it is, right? Um, do you believe that there's any objective reality that's outside of Nick?
Oh, well, I look at it as you can't have one without the other. I couldn't
Okay.
experience this world if someone else wasn't experiencing it from another perspective. I like the I don't know if you're like the universal laws, like the law of polarity. Like you can't like good cannot exist if bad does not exist, because there would be no way to define what's bad or good.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this life, I believe that we get the choice to choose what it is that how we want, well, to choose how we want to perceive things. And that's just the direction that we choose. And we go with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I see it. And it's just that I look how I view the world is like this. Every single person, this whole world, think of the whole world as a field. Every single person is a flower. And all I do is if someone asks me to water them, I'll water them. And if not, I will beautifully watch these flowers grow. Now, do I have my own biases? I do. My only bias that I hold is we should never do anything that will infringe upon someone else's free will. As long as it doesn't do that, I don't care what a person does. Other than that, live your life.
You know, what you said, something that I used to believe that I no longer believe, and I don't think I'll be able to explain it very well at all. But I used to think that, for example, you can't have up without down. You can't have hot without cold. I used to think that you can't have good, like basically, good and evil is like you can't have one without the other. What I now believe is that you can only have evil or bad if good exists, but good can exist on its own. Bad, I guess, is kind of like rotten good.
I get it.
So you can have, let's just say, dang it, dude, I'm trying to think of some ways that it was explained to me to where I was like, oh, that I see it. And
Well, I would say,
I'm not
no,
trying
you're
to
good.
convince you.
I would say I do have another perspective on it because I
Sure.
this is my thing. Like I said, I don't operate in absolutes. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at things from a bunch of different ways. And another way I look at good and bad is it doesn't exist. And the reason why I say it doesn't exist is
Mm-hmm.
because it's subjective and relative to the people within the situation. So if there is a 10 people who are about to go commit mass murder, to them what they're doing is the right thing that they're doing. That's their good.
Right.
But if there's people the victims of it, to them it's bad. And
Right.
so we can't there is no absolute definition for it because it depends so much on the people within the situation and what's taking place.
Dang, dude, you know what? Oh man, I wish I was better at explaining this stuff. Um, if you want to, what you can do, if there's anything that you're interested in me kind of reading about or kind of learning about, I'll be interested. Like you mentioned that
Yeah.
book from Alan Watts or whatever. There's a book that talks about these exact specific things, and he articulates himself so well that, because I used to believe that, what you're saying, I used to believe that. And my perception has changed now, because now, and I mentioned this in other videos too, because before I used, and if anyone's listening, they have to just hear it again, but I used to look at kind of good and bad as just kind of like a construct, and it depends on the situation. Kind of like, here in the United States, we drive on the right side of the street. In, let's say, England, they drive on the left side of the street. It's wrong in England to drive on the right side because that's just what they said.
Yeah.
Here, but it could be either or. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. Um, But then you have things like mathematics. Mathematics are inherently true, and we even mathematics is kind of under attack right now because I don't want to go on a rant on that, but in general, most people would agree 1 plus 1 is 2. Throughout civilization, people have kind of come to these conclusions that say, okay, we can understand these concepts. Even though if you start to really start to dive deep, they start to kind of dissolve. But on a surface level, you can say, okay, I have one bottle water, I have two bottle, or another one that makes two. Um, and all civilizations have kind of come to these conclusions. So in England, 1 plus 1 is 2. Here in the United States, 1 plus 1 is 2. In China, 1 plus 1 is 2. But it's never going to be 3. It's never going to be 1. It's always going to be 1 plus 1 is 2. Yeah, and that's kind of like a simple version of it. But in
Yeah.
general, mathematics is what it is, and we've kind of extracted that from our experience. So in general, you have two groups of people. One group of people feel that morality is more like you're driving on the left side of the street or the right side of the street, meaning it could be either. And like you said, um, of course, there's always going to be um, I, to agree with you on one sense. I don't think that morality is absolute in the sense of not something is good all the time, but
Yeah.
there are generalities that tend to be woven in within our experience. Long story short, I'll just tell you this: I now believe that morality is more like mathematics, meaning that throughout civilizations and throughout future civilizations, the same things will present themselves over and over again to be true. And you can say that um, you deny that, or you can say you could do it another way, and that's fine. But ultimately, it's not going to work out well. Similar to how you believe, you have many beliefs,
Yeah.
and I think ultimately those are beliefs that are going ultimately will end up serving the individual. Meaning, it's better off that you think that way.
Oh, definitely. I
I kind of
mean,
ranted a little bit there.
no, you're good. And I would say even when and so I forgot who I heard say this, but it made me think.
Hmm.
And I was listening to somebody and they were talking about the Fibonacci sequence, how you
Hmm.
can see that all within the universe. And they're like, oh,
Right.
well, that's everything. Well, that's only one perspective of it. Another perspective would be the only way that we can fathom what is even taking place is by using this symbol. But just because we use it doesn't mean that we know it. This is just all we know of that. If you
Hmm.
look at how civilizations advance, we always find something new out later on. There's always things that we don't know. Yeah, we're always taught to just search for something to hold and say, this is this.
Hmm.
And my biggest thing that I say to a lot of people is that labels equal limits. Like as soon as you label something or define something, that's it. You stopped it from being whatever it possibly could be moving forward, at least inside our minds.
Right.
And so that's why I kind of stay away from that, because as soon as I start to look at something as this is that, now every possibility of anything else is gone. And I've limited myself to my experience.
Hmm.
And so even when it comes down to good and bad, I'll give 5 different perspectives on it. And some might even contradict each other, because who knows what situation I'm going to be in when it really does matter how I view it.
Hmm.
And I just look at life, like you said, as one continuous flow. And for us to try to stop that flow is what causes all the crashes, instead of just allowing us to flow with that. And I think that if more people stop looking for their identity outside of themselves, things can be a little bit more smoother. Because what happens is when our feelings and our beliefs are challenged and aren't justified, we can get upset. Like if I truly like believed in my heart, like what I said is 100% factual, you said I don't agree with it, a lot of times people will start to look at the other person differently now. Oh, who are you to not agree with me? Da da da. But in reality, it's okay, because
I don't
who
like
knows
what you're
what'll
saying.
happen.
Makes me mad. You know?
Exactly. It's like,
Nah.
and then in the end, it's like it's okay, because we're all going to do our journey, and then we're all going to have moments. And I think that's a big thing too, is that people don't live life in the moment. They live life 10 years ahead, 5 years ahead, or 10 years in the past and 5 years in the past. And one of the books I read, you hear someone say pain only lives in the past and anxiety only lives in the future.
Mhm.
And so that's why you got to accept the gift of the present moment.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, man. I totally like on one hand, like I said, I in general, I think we're on the same page. I think when it comes to morality, and I think when it comes to like I said, I feel like those are a little bit. I feel like they're more objective.
Yeah.
But I do want to give you I guess I'll say a book recommendation, and it's just the beginning. And I know this book is totally going to seem super stupid, and if you don't read it, whatever, man. But I do, man. It's just such a great book, and I feel like it just sheds so much light on these concepts. If anything, what it will do for you is it will just kind of give you insight to a different perspective.
Definitely. Yeah.
So then you'd be like, oh, that's why people kind of think that or whatever. Um, the name of the book I feel like is going to be a big deterrence, but don't let that stop you. And you know what I'll say? You don't even need to read the whole thing. Just maybe the first few chapters, because basically what this guy is doing is he starts off from kind of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Just okay. Um, it's kind of like a God-centered thing. So he said, okay, is there a God? I don't know. No, actually, no. He doesn't even go there first. He doesn't. That I lie. The first thing he says is there anything that's right or wrong?
Hmm.
Is there that? And he very logically kind of deduces through all these things from when it comes to right and wrong and good and bad and all that. Then he gets to a point to where it's just like, okay, is there a God? Is God is God? So first he kind of goes, is there God? Then is God present? Or, because some people think, okay, God created everything and then split. Is God present? Is God good? And that might not seem interesting to you. Like I said, just that beginning part, I think I'm pretty sure you'll find interesting whether or not you agree with it at all. And the chapters are short, and it's only like the first few chapters, and you'll know right away whether or not it interests you. But anyway, the name of the book is Mere Christianity.
That's cool.
Like I said, I know the name, and forget about the rest of the book, just the beginning. I would be interested in chatting with you again if you do end up reading that, because I'd be interested in what you think about the way he lays out morality. I will tell you this, the way that he kind of describes it in the book is it's like music,
Mm-hmm.
right? On a piano, there are no right or wrong keys, right? So, but when you play music, there's a sequence that's pleasing to the ear.
Definitely.
And morality is like that. In general, there are certain things that tend to be kind of staple. So for example, in general, let's say murdering somebody is the wrong thing to do. In general, that tends to be something that I think most people would agree on. Even yourself, you said if it infringes on their free will. So that's morality that you have, that you believe in. You believe that's a true thing. And maybe you might even be flexible on that. But anyway, he describes it like that. So he describes it like music. So anyway.
I mean, it sounds interesting. That sounds like, because I would say the most interesting book that I have went through, because when I got on this journey, like you said, my audiobook library is ridiculous.
It's on Audible.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I can definitely get it then.
Just the beginning, just the first few chapters, and you'll know right away whether or not you like it. But go on.
Oh yeah, and so how I kind of lost the train for a second.
Oh yeah, no worries.
It's right there. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump to something else because whatever
sure,
I was about to say.
Yeah.
So even with what you were just saying, like with how he kind of like displayed morality as music. So kind of how my mind has worked, and it's what you said is right. I will absorb all knowledge, all information. I'll absorb everything, but I'm still gonna take it and I'm gonna sift through it and see like what serves me, what doesn't, what my viewpoints on, what they're not. Because no matter what I read or what I hear, this is someone else's perspective, and I get to create my own. And so I always take advantage of that. But when I hear like when people start to pick things, I look at, okay, so if we use the word morality, well, what is morality? Morality is something we use to define something else. And the only reason we use it to define something else because we all agree that morality is a thing and we follow that. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's like, why? Why? Because now that we have this morality, we have people on different sides. And anytime you choose a side, you automatically create a bias. And so once you choose a side of morality being this thing of what this is, there's now going to create conflict no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And I just look at a lot of it as just why? Why do we need, why do we need so badly to have something that we can hold on to that's outside of us? For what? Because it never gives us anything that we hold on to outside of us never lasts ever. At some point, someone's morality be challenged. Like we said, we believe murdering someone is wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
in self defense, is it still wrong? Is it
Well,
murder in that time?
well,
So it's
see
just
that.
like,
No,
oh,
no,
go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So that I think with all morality, there's always going to be, um, I guess, one-offs. So, for
Yeah.
example, this is kind of getting into philosophy, and I don't want to rant on about a lot of this stuff, but um, I guess I will say is I do believe in objective truth. I'm more interested in what is true, and I do believe that what is true, um, to a large degree, can be outside of me. So, for example, I believe in universal um, laws. So, for example, like gravity, right? Somebody can say, "Well, I don't believe that. That's I create my own reality, and it's just whatever I think, and I don't believe in gravity." But when I look at their lives, they're acting as if it does exist because they know that it does, but they say with their mouth that it doesn't. And maybe they believe it doesn't, at least consciously, but subconsciously, I believe that it's woven into our experience that that's a thing. Like the wall is there. I can say that it's not, and pretend like it's not this and this and this. But at the end of the day, that wall is outside of me, and I believe that's a true thing.
Mhm.
And I'm not telling you, hey man, this is what you got to think. Um, I just I feel like it's, remember, like I talked about the contradictions, and I'm with you on the absolute thing. But anyway,
But
enough of
I
that.
would
Let
say I just
me.
want to ask you. I just want to
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
something real
sure.
quick to what you said. So
Yeah, yeah.
So is your identity based within that wall,
No,
or is your identity based within gravity?
no.
Then
But
I
I.
would say, but I would say, so when I say like outside of ourselves, when we hold on to it, the
Mhm.
reason I say that is because when we find these things that we hold on to, we then identify with these things. That's why we get conflict, because our identity is being challenged. And so when we say like, gravity, if someone was to say this stove ain't hot, in my reality, I don't believe this stove is hot. I
Mhm.
mean, they're still gonna get burned,
Right.
but that's just what they choose to think. And if
Mhm.
their identity is in that and they get burned, then they'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this burned me. And we could sit over there and be like, how can you not believe that? It was hot.
Right.
But just because that's how they choose to be it depends on where your identity lies. So if your identity doesn't lie there, then that's not something that we hold on to. That's not something that defines us, because a lot of stuff that stems from us is based off what we believe about ourselves.
Makes sense. I like it. Okay, let me. I want to bring up another thing to you real quick here. Let me see. How long have we been chatting, sir?
I don't know.
Because I wanted to bring up the kind of like my recent, I guess I'll call it an epiphany on meditation.
Mhm.
Because I've been a big fan of meditation for a while now. And the way I kind of described it, at least in the past, was just being present.
Mhm.
So, not thinking about something that happened to me, not thinking about something that will happen to me. Just like you mentioned about pain lives in the past, anxiety lives in the future, just being present. And you mentioned, you could be doing things while meditating. I think a lot of people work out and meditate,
Oh yeah.
just counting those reps, being aware of your body, being very present, um, which is another big reason why I think working out is good for that reason too. Um, Recently, I've kind of started to feel like meditation potentially could be like a double-edged sword in a way, meaning that I'm starting to see some of the potential downfalls to it or
Hmm.
dangers of it. And again, you don't have to agree with me. This is just
Oh yeah.
something that I've thought about recently. So, some people will say, okay, meditation, you want to, be present, focus on your breath, kind of, if something comes into your mind, you discard that. You don't want to dwell on what's happening in your mind too long, which I think is great. Don't get me wrong. I think that's good. But one of the potential downsides to that, in my opinion, is that you're kind of creating a blank slate, kind of like what you said too. You said, like I'm open. The thing though, that I guess one of the potential downsides to that is, have you ever heard you don't stand for if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything?
I've
Something
heard it
along those
before.
lines.
Hmm.
So let's just say that you clear your mind, right? And then you watch a show or something. I feel like what's happening is you're putting yourself in a more susceptible position to be manipulated or to be molded. Um, so I guess one of the things that I've been more aware of fairly recently is just being aware if I am going to engage in that, let's say meditation, I'm going to be much more careful about what I kind of allow in through my senses, if
Oh,
that makes
definitely
sense.
get that. I mean, I would just say, first, I would say for any person that is into meditation, what's your intention?
Hmm.
Like I always look at it when you meditate without an intention, that's like to me, that's a very deep form of meditation. Because one thing that you said in the beginning, when you said when you have these thoughts, you discard them. I
Hmm.
don't teach. I teach to be your meditation is full acceptance. You're going to be in full acceptance of whatever comes to your head. You're going to be full acceptance of whatever times you want to move or scratch your arm. You're going to be full acceptance of everything because we live most of our life in resistance. And it's within
Explain
that,
explain that to me a little bit.
like in full
Just
acceptance of
yeah,
like the thoughts and
describe
stuff.
that.
Okay. So look at it as if you're sitting there and you're meditating, and let's say you've been on, I'm just going to throw an app out there like TikTok. And there's a
Hmm.
TikTok sound. And as soon as you start meditating, that TikTok sound just starts playing in your head all the time, all the time, all the time. And you're like, oh my gosh, I want to get rid of it. And I'd be like, no, why? Clearly that's there. So let it be there. As I said earlier, we're not our thoughts. And so if you allow that to be there, you're in acceptance of it, all the power of it is gone. A lot of, like I said before, we're always looking for those absolutes for some reason. And when we can sit within acceptance and be okay within acceptance and sit with ourselves, we realize how much power we really have because we took away the ability for us to try to grab something to identify with it. We now are just sitting in the presence of everything. And that's why I'll say, like, when you had said you be like more susceptible to manipulation, 100% true. Because when you watch television, your brain goes into a theta state. And that means your subconscious is more susceptible to suggestion. But the same is when you meditate, your brain goes into a theta state. And that's why I say, what's the intention when you meditate? Because you can now influence your subconscious brain in this state on your own to where you won't have to have any outside things to do that. And so it's just, I would even say just more like gaining more knowledge on what it is and stuff like that.
Let me ask you a question. So you mentioned about the TikTok sound right in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, because you mentioned how your thoughts can carry momentum. One
Mm-hmm.
thing I also believe is what you resist persists.
Yes.
So, just the act of like trying to get it out sometimes makes things worse. So let's say that the TikTok sound is in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also a thought there that you don't want it there because it's distracting you, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say about that?
Now I would say sit with it. The fact that you have resistance to the thought that you don't want is literally telling you that there's your issue right there, is that resistance. And the question is, why do you have that resistance? And that's where that person gets to ask themselves that question. And as they're sitting with it, they get to figure that out. Because in that space, you created that resistance, whether you realize it or not yet. But when you get into that theta brain state of meditation, you're now going to be more open to your thoughts of maybe even figuring out why you did that in the first place. And I'm not saying as soon as someone does that, oh, I can do that and now I figured it out. No, it takes time. Just like working out, everything takes time and practice and consistency.
So is kind of like your philosophy right now is kind of, you mentioned being in the flow, removing
Mhm.
blocks, removing resistance. Is there any time that you feel like you voluntarily set yourself up to be in a position to experience resistance. For example, from a physical level, resistance training. You're putting your body against resistance purposefully because you know it'll make you stronger.
Yeah.
Stepping outside your comfort zone, doing something that you don't want to do, there's that resistance, but you do it anyway.
Oh yeah.
So, how do you kind of reconcile, on one hand, kind of removing resistance, not being, you know, kind of going with the flow, and then also kind of seeing the benefits of resistance,
Mhm.
at least on some
So
level?
no, yeah. And so like we said, we get to choose what we perceive and how we do things. I would literally put myself, if I used to be have night terrors as a kid. I'm talking insane. Like I was 17 years old, still sleeping with a nightlight. Like it would be that bad. And I realized as I got older was, okay, why? Like, what is it that I'm so afraid of, that I'm running from, that I think is going to happen, that I'm going to experience? So I put myself in that situation. I would purposefully put myself in fearful situations just so I could look at death in the face. And it was not easy. It's not something that I would go out and tell people to do. If you feel like you should do that, by all means. But that is something that really opened my eyes up to, it's me doing this. I'm not saying danger is not real. Danger will forever be something, but the
Mm-hmm.
fear that comes with it doesn't have to be. And that's just something that I've used before. It's like we said, with resistance training, I'm gonna work out for this purpose. So for this, like I'll be very open. Like I used to be really like wary of like psychedelics and stuff like that. Because
Mm-hmm.
I was always told as a kid, it's gonna rot your brain, mess up your mind, it's gonna do this, it's gonna do that. But then I did it once and I sat inside a dark closet. And I sat inside this closet, everything around me changed. Stuff turned to teeth. The light that was shining under the closet turned to blood red. And it was just an experience. And I was sitting there. And as I sat there in the midst of it, I was like, why am I doing this to myself? And as soon as I said that, everything started to change. And I was like, whoa, awesome. But that was just my path and how I
So,
did it.
you were perceiving these things, and when you said, "Why am I doing that to myself?" Your literal perception of what was
Change.
going on in that closet changed.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that. You know what I think's interesting too? Because I feel like you and I feel like we're on the same page with a lot of stuff. But I feel like we're so free
Oh, yeah.
to choose what we experience, and what really kind of personifies that in a way is what we choose to watch. Because a lot of people are like, man, this sucks, I don't want to be scared, or I hate this anxiety, or like, but then you're choosing, let's say, to watch a movie that's going to make you scared.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, you have that choice, but people will say, I don't want to be scared, right? But it's like, well, why do you watch that movie that's going to make you scared? I'm not knocking scary movies. I'm not saying not to watch them, blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying that's a choice.
Yeah.
No one's making you watch that, and that makes you feel a certain way. You see?
Yep.
So I feel like that kind of shed a lot of light, um, at least for me, in regards to like how free we are in terms of how we feel.
Definitely.
I want to ask you one more thing,
Dope.
and this is probably like a bad question, or not even a question. I don't know. I saw you kind of like, these days people are really kind of split politically,
Mhm.
and I'm assuming your answer is going to be like, kind of like, you don't take sides or whatever, but you posted some things that were kind of, what's the word? I guess surprising. I
Gotcha.
guess.
Mhm.
Um, I think you posted something about like Democrats or something, like on facts or something.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
probably.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. So how do you feel politically? Do you
I
feel?
mean, personally,
Yeah.
I think it's all a game. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I think it's a game is because you got two sides that we see fighting. Yeah, stuff for us don't really change that much. But it seems like everything else there does something different. And so I've always looked at it as something that is to make people think they have a sense of control, when in reality they don't. And as far as the sides, since I'll say this all the time, is that since we find things to identify with ourselves outside of us, I like political parties. Now
Mm-hmm.
people have the option to choose. And when we choose and other people choose with us, and we're around the people that choose with us, now we feel good about ourselves. So now we believe this is how it's supposed to be.
You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about, man. I want you to know. You need to open your eyes.
You
Nah,
know,
I'm just kidding. All right, man. Well, I think that's it. We've been talking for about an hour. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Like, if anyone's interested in your social emotional
oh,
program, or how they
yeah.
can contact you, and just say whatever you want.
Awesome. Yeah, no, feel free to I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Personally, it's at the bald sage. And then on Instagram and TikTok as well, our company is on there, and it is just called Balance Period, the word period. And that's what it's called. It's called Balance Period. And you can come and check out. We have a lot of free content. That's one big thing that we do. We put out a lot of free stuff, but we also do have ways for you to support us. We just opened up our store so you can get merch. We have clothes, hoodies, hats, bags, all that good stuff. And then we just have, and then there's our podcast where we have people get on there and share stories of growth, share stories of how self-care has changed their life, and just stories of triumph to kind of like continue to motivate and inspire people. So yeah.
Cool, man. I'm glad I got to chat with you.
No,
It's
me
been
too.
like 6 years, like you said, and I'm happy, that you're doing all this stuff. It's cool, and maybe we'll chat again.
Oh, we're gonna have to after I check out the book because I'm interested now.
Yeah, yeah. Just like I said, just the beginning. Um, yeah, I am interested on kind of what you think about it. So, and
Cool.
maybe I'll be on your thing too.
Yes, sir.
All right, buddy. Enjoy your day. Anything else?
That's it. Hey, you
That's it.
people enjoy the rest of your amazing day.
Adios, sir.
Later.